Hi there! In this video I'm going to walk you through how I created this bold and beautiful Twiggy painting, from the first layer of paint to the final details. I'll show you how I use simple tools like stencils and a projector to make it fun and easy for anyone to follow, even if you haven't painted before. You can download the exact files I've used so that you can follow along at home. But before you start, I highly recommend watching the full video first. That way you'll know all the tips and tricks and your painting will turn out even better. Let's dive in and get creative. If we haven't met before, hi! My name is Mille Maj and I'm a Danish artist. Since 2009 I've been teaching these fun, powerful painting techniques to thousands of students. My mission is simple. I want to teach you how to create bold, expressive art and maybe even turn it into a way to earn money through your own artwork and workshops. So if you're ready, let's do this. To begin the background, I'm aiming for those warm, burnt sunset colors. So I just dab a few small blobs of paint here and there on the canvas. You don't need a lot of paint, just enough so there's something to work into wet on wet. Be careful with the darker colors, especially red in this case, because it can easily take over and eat up your entire painting. Then I grab a kitchen sponge and I start working the colors in circular motions. I use circles because the canvas texture is made up of tiny squares and this helps the paint spread out and soak in evenly. As I go, I mix in a little white and I'm still using the same sponge. I add the white to tone things down and lighten up the colors just a bit. Then I move into my orange and I start blending in some yellow too, just to mix things up a little. And still, I'm working in circles, as you can see. Right now it looks like a total mess, but trust me, it's going to be better. You just have to trust the process. This part can be a bit tricky for some people. It really takes a bit of practice and you need to get the feel for things like how does your paint behave, how long does it stay wet, what kind of sponge are you using, how does that sponge actually work, and how long can you wait before blending those transitions. I take a dry sponge and I gently go over the transitions to smooth things out a bit. But honestly, I don't spend too much time on perfect fades in this painting, because a lot of it will be covered up later with images and effects. They take up a lot of space on the canvas anyway. Then I grab a new sponge and I start working into the red. I do this to avoid mixing the colors too much. It's all about switching between dry and fresh sponges, as being mindful not to take the yellow sponge and keep pushing it into the red, because then everything just turns orange. If I use a clean sponge for the red, then it stays red. Right now you'll notice it looks pretty patchy and uneven. There are lighter spots and gaps in the paint, but I'm not too worried about that at all. I'm going to go over it later with some thinner layers to deepen the color. Here I'm using a sponge that already has some red in it, so it turns into a very dark orange and the yellow basically disappears. That's just something to keep in mind as you work through the process. At this point I'm just working across the entire canvas, blending the colors a bit with the sponge. And yeah, it looks like a mess right now, but trust me, it'll get better. This is just the first layer. The goal is simply to get some colors on the canvas. Sometimes the hardest part is just starting, just putting down that first bit of color. But don't let that hold you back. Seriously, just go for it. Are you overthinking? We don't do that around here. Just throw some paint on it. If it turns out awful, you can always cover it up with white later on. And honestly, that often adds something magic to the process. So don't be afraid. And if you find yourself being too stiff or too controlled, try using your non-dominant hand. That usually shakes things up and helps people loosen up a bit. I'm grabbing a little spray bottle now because the paint dries super fast. When I need to work on these transitions, the paint can be just slightly damp. That helps. But be careful, because sometimes the paint dries so much that if you add water, you'll actually start washing the color off instead of blending it. So go easy with the water, just a tiny bit. But again, I'm not too stressed about it at this stage, because I already know I'll be adding another layer on top. Right here, the paint's gotten pretty wet, so the color ends up looking kind of washed out. This is where I say the colors become undefined. It's not really red, not really orange, not really yellow, just a kind of in between. Now it's time to fix it. I'm starting to work in the next layer of color, especially with the yellow, and suddenly you can really see how much richer and more vibrant it becomes, from a dull yellow to a proper, juicy yellow. That's the beauty of working in thin layers. You let it dry, then you go over it again, a thin layer of orange over yellow, yellow over red, red over orange, and layer by layer, your background starts looking way more intentional and deep. I often see people slap on a quick layer of color, and honestly, it ends up looking a bit unfinished. So take your time, it really shows. I really think it pays off to spend a bit of time on this part. It should look like there's some depth in the painting, like you've actually worked it through with multiple layers. Now I'm adding a bit of orange, and I'm using a new dry sponge. So it's pure orange, nothing mixed in. It looks kind of intense right now. I give it a quick spritz of water and thin it out, and then I gently work into the other yellow and over towards the red. Now you can see the color starting to shine a bit more, but yeah, the transition is still pretty rough at this point. So I grab a fresh sponge, add just a tiny bit of water and start blending right where the yellow meets the orange. This is how you start to bring your colors together. If blending is hard for you, don't worry, I recommend working in just one area at the time. Start with yellow and orange, blend them together until it looks nice. Then move from orange to red and work that transition. Then go back from red to orange and blend it again. By doing it step by step, you avoid these dry patches where the paint just won't blend, no matter what you do. Take your time and enjoy the process. Now I'm waking up the red a bit, giving it a good layer. Honestly, it could have been a thinner one. You could easily add a bit of water here to thin it down. But again, I don't spend too much energy worrying about it at this stage, because I know I'll be layering lots of elements on top later on. This might not be the prettiest background I've ever made, but that's totally fine. It doesn't need to be. It's just a backdrop that will sit underneath everything else. I'm just adding a bit more color here, mostly to saturate the background. And as you can see, the color becomes a bit deeper and you start getting that richness that's hard to achieve with just a single layer of paint. I really like going in with another layer of color to create more depth. If you can see the canvas showing through the paint, then, in my opinion, there's not enough color on there. But here's the real art, knowing when to stop. If you keep smearing semi-dry paint around on top of other semi-dry paint, it becomes really hard to work with. So, build your layers, yes, but stop before it turns into a sticky mess. I'm adding a little yellow down here again, just to brighten things up. It suddenly got really dark. You know what? It reminds me of a student I once had, many years ago. She came to class carrying 4 paintings, 1 hour before the course even started, and said, "I need to finish all these by 8 tonight." It was a bit intense, and sure enough, at one point she started adding red to all of them. I told her, "Careful now, don't let it all turn red." 5 minutes later, all 4 paintings were completely red. So yeah, I might have added a bit too much red here as well. But now I'm using bubble wrap to pull some of the color off and create a texture effect. I place it in the yellow area and use the leftover paint on the wrap to drag the red into the lighter space to blend things out and brighten the red a bit. It's such a fun way to fix things. And it's also a great trick to hide some of those awkward transitions. Kind of like when you place a stencil over a rough blend and create a visual element right on top. So here's my advice. Don't stress too much. Don't overthink it, and definitely don't keep fussing with the same spot too long. Use your background colors, add a stencil or an effect where it needs a little camouflage, and boom, it all comes together. Alright, the background is ready. Now I've projected this target onto the canvas, then I go sit at my table to paint it. I'm using magenta tone here, and as always, I stay within my color palette that really blends well with the rest of the colors. In fact, in this entire painting, the only complementary elements are the flies I'll be adding on later. Everything else stays in the same color family. No big contrast, just harmony all the way through. Now it's just about painting inside the lines. This magenta color I'm using isn't fully opaque, and that's totally fine. It means to be more of a background effect anyway. You don't need to make it perfect or fill in every edge neatly. I actually really like when the colors is a bit uneven and raw. I'm a big fan of the imperfect. Maybe it's because I don't navigate well in perfection. Who knows? We're all different like that, right? I'm actually a bit of a perfectionist, but not when it comes to this part. Here, I like when it's a bit, well, I don't want to say messy, but a little off, a little crooked. I really like that vibe. Sometimes I'll even leave things unfinished on purpose, or I'll flip things upside down, or mirror them. All of that out of the box stuff. I'm totally into that. I don't want things to be too neat or too proper. And that's all part of the background effect here too, that the color feels shaded and a little uneven, especially like you can see right here. So now it's just about finishing up painting. Once that's done, I'll start sketching in some leaves over the top. I'll show you exactly how I do that in just a moment, but so far, so good. Now I've projected an image of some leaves across the canvas. I'll leave a link to the parts I've used in this painting in the description so you can do it too. I hope you feel up for it. If you want to see a special person painted, leave me a comment and I'll see if I can make your wish come true. Here you can see me using a white Posca marker, and later on I'll be using a yellow too. I'm sticking with these soft neutral colors, but honestly, a green Posca over this magenta, that would look amazing too. So it's really up to you. At this point you can decide if you want to start adding a bit of contrast, or if you rather keep working with the same tones and color families you've been using so far. For me this isn't a big dramatic effect, it's not dominant, but in the finished painting you'll actually see the leaves quite clearly. They are just a little detail that sits in the background, but I really love that. There's something so cool about delicate hand-drawn lines, especially when it comes to organic shapes and nature-inspired elements. So I found this fly in my image archive and I really want to add it to the canvas. Now the trick is to figure out exactly where it should go. If you're using a digital projector, you're a bit limited because you can only rotate the image in quarter turns. I still use my old overhead projector for the smaller elements where I want full control. It's great when you need to tilt or rotate the image just right, especially when something needs to sit at an odd angle. But you can actually do the same thing with your digital projector if you have it mounted on a tripod. Just loosen the right screw, tilt the projector slightly, and tighten the screw again. Now you have more freedom to decide what angle you want your image to go onto your canvas. Just a little extra pro tip from me to you. As you can see, I've decided that I want my fly up here in the corner. So while the projector is still on, I go ahead and paint the entire shape of the fly. Once I've painted the silhouette, I let it dry. Sometimes I use a hairdryer to speed things up a little bit. And then I paint it over again to make sure it's fully covered. After that, I go in, start drawing the details. Here's the thing, once you've reached this stage, don't touch your projector. Don't nudge it, don't move your canvas, because even the slightest shift, just a millimeter, will throw off everything, and the lines won't match anymore. So keep it still. So now I'm painting the fly. I'm adding a bit of green to the head area because I want it to look like a common spitfly. I mix in some blue and green and blend the colors slightly. It's a bit hard to see here because of the bright light from the projector. I add the green to the head and to the back of the fly, leaving the wings white. Then I add just a touch of blue and play around with the tones. I'm aiming for that oily shimmer you often see in these flies, where you get the different hues depending on the light. That's what I'm trying to recreate with this layering technique. Now I'm using my hairdryer to make sure everything is completely dry. That's super important, because when I go in with my Posca marker in a minute to draw the legs, details and patterns, the paint absolutely needs to be dry. If it's even a little damp, it'll ruin the marker tip. The paint sticks to the tip and boom, your Posca is dead. A little bonus tip, you can actually pull the tip out and flip it around. On the other side it's often like new again, so don't throw it away too soon. Give it a second chance. Alright, time to finish drawing this little fly. This is one of those images where the lines are pretty faint, so I have to use a bit of intuition. Just feel it out and do your best. I really enjoy drawing the little wing patterns, so give it a shot. Make it your own. What I love most about these flies is that my husband absolutely hates them. Like, he really hates them. He thinks they're totally out of place on this painting. He can't stand them. But here's the thing, ever since I started adding these flies to my paintings, pretty much every student on my workshops want to add them too. they think they're awesome. So maybe I just have better taste than he does. Personally, I think they're super cool. I'm curious, what do you think? Would you paint them on your painting? Let me know in the comments. I just have a thing for insects in general. I love them. I've painted bees, ladybugs, dragonflies, you name it. I even have a whole image archive filled with different bugs. There's just something about painting insects on my artwork that makes me happy. The only thing you'll never catch me painting: spiders. Nope, big no. That's a hard pass. I hate spiders. So yeah, flies, yes, spiders, not happening. So, one fly down, one more to go. But first I'm sketching out a little sign that I want in the background of this piece. I'm using a yellow Posca pen because I'll be painting the sign yellow later on. And you'll notice I didn't bother drawing the frame, just the text. Also, yeah, I flipped it upside down because that's just the kind of person I am. I like when things are a bit backwards. There's just something about flipping things upside down. Now I want this sign to really pop in yellow. But here's the thing about yellow paint. It's often super transparent. Unless it's packed with titanium white, most yellows just don't cover at all. So instead of painting yellow straight onto the reddish orange background, which would make it look kind of muddy and dull, I first paint the whole thing with titanium white. That gives me a bright base, like a canvas reset, so when I go over with yellow, it actually looks yellow. Not beige, not sad mustard, proper yellow. Here's another little pro tip. This goes for neon paints too. If you want neon to shine bright, always give it a white base first. Now it's time to paint the second fly. And the reason I didn't do them both at once, well, this one's going to sit more on top in the outermost layer. And I knew I'd be adding more elements underneath first, so I waited. Just like before, I start painting the whole shape in white. It needs a solid, opaque base, no shortcuts here. Once that's dry, I go in with blue this time. You'll notice the first fly was more greenish, so this one's got a cooler tone. It's all about variation and play. Adding different tones keep the artwork interesting. You don't want everything to look the same. This blue is super transparent, it's just a light wash. There's not a ton of pigment in it, and that's the purpose. I want it soft and subtle. Now to the fun part. This is my favorite moment, when I finally get to work on the main subject. This is where the painting really starts to take shape. I love this part so much. I want her to really pop from the background, so I'm going in with a thin layer of neon color. Nothing fancy, I'm just using a sponge to drag the paint out in a soft layer. It really doesn't take much to create a visible glow. I make sure to keep the sponge inside the silhouette, and you'll see me dabbing along the edge to define it. I actually cut the sponge into smaller pieces, so it's easier to control. I could have made it even smaller for the tight spots, but hey, I'm not one to do things the easy way, as my husband says. Let's be real, I kind of like when things are a little complicated. Make sure you have an even layer and step back once in a while to see how it's looking from a distance. If the paint is thicker in some areas, you'll end up with weird shadows as soon as you turn off the projector light. A little trick. Stand right in front of your projector now and then to see what you've actually painted. And if you go outside the lines, no big deal, just wipe it off. I usually keep a damp cloth nearby, but honestly, here I'm just using my fingers. I want that target in the background to still be visible, so the layer shouldn't be too opaque. Also why neon colors are perfect for this. They are semi-transparent and super easy to work with if you are aiming for a glowing layered effect. If you want to create something that looks transparent, what I'm doing down here on her shoulder and chest is simply not filling in the paint completely. I realized it looked kind of awesome to leave it a little bit unfinished. So instead of painting her full silhouette and filling in it all, I just smudged it around loosely. And I think that gives a really cool look. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. It's totally okay if it looks like I didn't quite finish it, or like the paint started to drip a little. You could spray on some water to push that effect, but honestly, I think this already looks pretty cool on its own. So I'm just going to stop right here and let that part stay a little messy and undone. Now I'm starting to sketch her. And when you're sketching, it's really important to include all the little details around the eyes, nose and mouth. You want people to recognize who it's meant to be. This is not time to get creative and start changing things, because if you tweak too much here and there, it can quickly become unrecognizable. The good news, this particular design is super easy to trace. It's a clean, crisp vector file, no weird pixels or blurry edges, smooth, clear lines. Just draw it exactly as you see it and make sure you capture as many of those facial details as possible. Once the sketch is finished, we'll start painting it. But as you can see, I'm a total nerd about the details, especially the eyelashes. This portrait, they are everything. They are what give her that signature expression, so take your time. I've seen so many of my students rush this part at my workshops, and they end up with disconnected lines or missing shapes. And here's the thing, later when you're sitting at your table trying to figure out what to paint, it can be really confusing if you didn't sketch everything clearly. Like, what was this shape again? Is this hair, background, a shadow? So do yourself a favor. Take the time now to sketch it properly. Make sure it looks clean and clear. Here's a little trick. If you're sketching a lot of details, especially in the hair, where there might be tons of lines, it's easy to lose track of what's supposed to be painted later. So I often put small marks in the area I'll be painting. It helps me later when I'm sitting close up and can't tell what's what. You're basically giving your future self a roadmap, and trust me, future you will be so grateful. Now I'm just finishing sketching her, and then it's time to paint. This part is one of my absolute favorites. Once I get to this stage, I make myself a nice cup of coffee, settle in, and just enjoy the process. It's a bit like paint by numbers, and I love that calm state of mind I get into. It's so calming and meditative. There's really not much to say, it's just something that needs to be done. So, brush in hand, and off we go. If you're going to paint, it can really help to invest in a good fluid black paint. I recommend Golden Fluid or Schminke. System 3 also makes one, and it's so bad, do not buy that one. It has absolutely no coverage. If you don't have a fluid color, no worries, you can totally use regular black paint. Your painting won't suffer. But the fluid ones from both Golden and Schminke is highly pigmented, slightly more liquid, and covers in just one coat. It flows beautiful into the texture of the canvas, and it lasts forever. Seriously, a little goes a very long way. So even though it's a little more expensive to buy from the start, it's really cheaper in the long run as it goes, as I said, a really long way. Here I've sketched the word first stop down in the bottom left corner. I'm painting it black because Twiggy herself doesn't have a lot of black in her, and I felt like something was missing in that empty space down here. To finish it all off, I go back in and add some more leaves, just to add a little more detail in the top layer. It all comes together now, and I really love this painting. And that's it, the painting is finished. I really hope you enjoyed watching the process and that you've picked up some inspiration, or maybe even a few tricks. I'd love to hear from you. Could you see yourself trying out this painting? Drop a comment below and let me know if you're tempted to create your own version of this Twiggy piece. It's always so much fun to see how others interpret the same idea in their own way. And don't forget, you'll find the link to download all the images I've used for this painting right here in the description below. Go and have fun. See you!